For summer 2020, KKW Beauty has released a Classic II collection. I like to think of it as, well, the typical summer bronze vibes. However, I do see a lot of cool tones, an overlay of coolness, and that is what caught my eye and why I wanted to pick out a few items from the collection. So I do have the Classic II Eyeshadow Palette to share with you. I'm going to provide my review, as well as the new lip glosses that have launched. They were a collection of 11 lip glosses, and they range all different tones, from very pale light nude tones all the way down to the deep, rich chocolate nude. Classic II palette looks exactly like Classic I. I would have done something a little bit different, maybe put like a 2, I don't know, something different to distinguish between the two. The only thing, maybe if you want to, as far as storing purposes, the writing here on the back is black and the writing for number 1 is white. So that's how I've been kind of storing it backwards, so that way I know which is which. I also pulled out my other 3 palettes that I own. That way I can let you know, based on the tones here in Classic II, you know, in case you were wondering, how close in tones are they to the matte cocoa palette. I have the Soo Fire palette, and then the collaboration with Mario, as well as also going in a comparison against Classic I. So I think that that will help you in the event you were thinking, are there just going to be dupes all over the place? I hear that a lot. Everyone's like, KKW Beauty, the palettes all look the same. Now let's look at the swatches for Classic II, but I'm also going to throw in what I feel are the closest, if not the exact dupe, from the other 4 KKW Beauty palettes that I already own. First shade up is called Exist, and that is described as a matte cream. The palette that I feel shares the same exact tone is in the Mario palette, and that color shade is called Decade. They both have that, well, matte cream look, neutral tone, something you can put all over your lid, set your primer. The other palettes that I have, when I'm looking at that particular tone, they do come off as more of a warm tone, cream tone, versus more of a neutral tone that Exists gives off. Next shade is called Geode. It's described as metallic, multi-dimensional truffle brown with gold flecks. That is my favorite shade in the entire palette, and there is no other pan in any of the other palettes that matches that tone. That shade is fantastic, and it's what I have on my eyes now. It just sparkles and it glitters, and even in like the restroom light, you know, restroom lighting has horrible lighting, right? It was just sparkling and just like gorgeous, gorgeous. Favorite color. Next shade up is called Haze. It's described as a matte ash brown. The shade that I thought was very similar at first glance is in the matte cocoa palette. That shade is called Cocoa. At first glance, they look exactly the same. However, swatched, Cocoa is darker than Haze. So I would say Haze is where you're looking at it going light brown, and then Cocoa would be like that medium brown. Next up is called Solar, and that is metallic golden copper, and that is a shade that is a standalone. There is not another color within the 4 palettes that I own that is that same tone. This is named Solar. Very much think of that, well, solar eclipse, think of the sun, think of the moon, think of that red-orange moon. That's it. That's what it looks like to me, a red-orange, no, what they call it? Blood moon. That's what they call it. That's the color that it gives off to me, and that's actually what I have in my tier deck. Last color in the first row is called Neutral. So that's a shade you're probably looking at and going, no, I know darn well I've seen that in another one of her palettes. And exactly, I thought the same thing. But the only one that was, I would say, okay, it's very much maybe borderline close to it, is in the Classic I palette. Now, neutral is described as a matte light peach beige. So think of that word, peach beige. But in the classic pan color here, this tone here, which is called Dash, this one has a lot more pink tone in it. It is a rose, like that mauve tone, light tone in color. That is the only one. That is where I would actually look at and say, oh, peach and pink. It's the only one. The other 3 palettes that I have, though that tone is not only a lot more neutral, it's a lot lighter in color. Moving on to the second row, the first pan is called Abundance. That's described as a matte, soft beige taupe. That's another color you're probably thinking, I know, again, I've seen that in her other palettes, because that's what I thought too at first glance. I'm gonna look at my notes here. Again, it's similar to Classic I. So the only one, again, I would kind of look at and think of is this tone that's right here. So that one is called Florence. But Florence has a yellow tint to it, and it's darker, so it's much warmer. Same if I looked in the Fire palette. That matte one there is, it's more of like a peach tone as well, but it's completely, I would say, different because it's more warm tone. That palette is actually a warm tone palette. So that's another thing too with the Fire palette pans, they're always going to have that warm undertone. If I looked within the Cocoa palette, the matte Cocoa, these tones in here again are much more of that neutral base. So not even something where it's like this tone right here, it still is not close enough to that tone. Same with the next color. That pan is called Gravity. Gravity is described as a metallic, warm, deepened chocolate brown. We're going to get into that quad that drew me in. So that is a standalone shade, and it is not found in any of the other 4 palettes that I have. That color, it's what I have on my eyes that I mixed with Geode. Next pan over is Terrain. That is described as a matte, deep, dark brown. So this is also a brown that is quite unique in the sense that it is what I would call a true chocolate brown. The true Hershey chocolate in the little s'mores. It is a deep, deep, rich brown. Only palette that shares the exact tone, so I'm gonna say maybe 1% off, is in the matte Cocoa. So the color called Wood, it's the last deep, rich tone here. This tone, I would say, is, we're talking 1% off. That color as that tone in Classic II. You have to be so up in the eye to see the slightest bit of difference, because in Classic II, it's just slightly deeper, just slightly deeper than in the matte Cocoa, but it's there's a 1%. I wouldn't fret over it. The darkness and the richness of that tone, what's it called again? Terrain in Classic II, is not in the Fire palette. That dark matte tone has that red burgundy undertone to it. So again, Fire is a warm palette. The the brown tone that's in the Mario palette here, this is a chocolate brown as well, but it's not as deep and rich. Like on my skin tone especially, I can tell when that color is going to be rich and deep, but it's not similar to the one that's in the Mario. Then again in Classic I, this tone here pulls more of going into that burgundy tone as well in the Classic I. So they're not those two dark, deepish tones to add that last bit of depth in the eye. They're still not the same. They are different between Classic I and Classic II. Next shade is called Energy. It's described as a metallic chestnut bronze. That is a beautiful tone as well. And that tone does not match up against any of the other palettes. Based on the fact it also states that it's like a chestnut bronze, I'm thinking more red inside, you know, deeper, rich. So of course I went to the Fire palette. Again, just wasn't there. Last shade is called Manifest. That is described as a matte, rich, red brown. So the first palette I went to, naturally thought of as the warmest palette, which is the Fire palette. That tone again, it's pulling off a red burgundy tone right there. So it is not closest at all to that. So there's no dupe right there. I looked at the last color here within, well, it's not the last, but it's this reddish tone right there. And again, this one still is pulling a lot more red in the Mario palette. So it's not that addition of what I would say that perfect mix of red and brown. The Mario one has a lot more red in it. It is not matching up to any of the browns that's in the Classic I. So the last one is to look at the matte Cocoa color here. And I'm looking at my notes here, I still do not see any matches that where you're looking at it first glance is the same, because again, that red mix of red and brown is still not apparent in this tone here. You would think that it would be that, and of course it's not this one, which is much more deeper. So that's where I would naturally gravitate to, is this tone there, but it's a lot deeper in the Classic II, and again it has that mix of red and brown, so I feel it is a standalone palette. For my eyeshadow look right now, all I used in the palette is this matte tone here, so I just used one matte, which, let me tell you something, is very rare for me to take one color and just create some depth. But what I think I'm going to do is it sparked another video in my idea, because I want to teach you guys something about that. So stay tuned for that. But on my lid, I mixed these two colors, of course, my two favorite shades there. And then I just used these lighter tones here to blend out the depth, like the darkness, and then I put them on my brow bone. So that's exactly what I did. And I dip into everything if I can. So I dipped into that, I dipped into that, I dipped into that, and boop, brush it off a little bit with that. Moving on to the glosses. Again, they dropped 11 new glosses. They're all, again, nude-based tone. Going through the shades here, I'm looking at them. I'm thinking, okay, I'm only going to allow myself one, so I'm not going to go crazy. Which tone do I want to get? So what I tend to do is, when I'm only allowing myself one tone, I go with the color that is not as abundant in my collection, and that will run towards the peach tone. So I looked at everything, the description, and I chose Nude 2.5, which is described as a honey nude. I did pick out the two lip liners that were in the sale section, because I like her lip liners already. I knew that 90s Glam would go great. It will also go good with this one too, which is the darker one, which is 90s chic. But I knew it would go perfect. So that's what I have on my lips. I just filled them in completely with the lighter tone lip liner, and then I just put the gloss on top. There is a slight scent to this. I can't really pinpoint what it reminds me of. I think of just like a plastic doll, plastic something plastic at first glance, and I think, why is it there? Why are you there? But then it's just, it doesn't linger. And then I'm just like, okay. But on the first time I put it on, I'm like, why are you there? So again, that's why I'm also happy I just grabbed one. So this is the 2.5. Let's try the out of focus. That is what 2.5 looks like in natural sunlight. If you have a lighter complexion, you can just wear 2.5 on your bare lips and call it a day, because it gives off a very peach tone look. Texture of this gloss, I feel, is very similar to the other glosses too. They're not thick in texture, so your lips don't feel like sticky together, and I don't have any type of separation. It just, goes on and just stays there. It is a gloss, so of course it's going to rub off throughout the day. It's not something that I'm expecting to stay on for very long, so it's something that I do reapply. On the website, it states that the formula has the hyaluronic acid, it's got vitamin E, so it's trying to give it a lot more of almost the skincare benefits added to it. I don't feel like any plumping sensations. I don't feel anything that is like drastically different, in my opinion. It just feels like a very comfortable gloss in a beautiful tone that's going to match with a lot of different lip liners and lipsticks that I currently use. And that's it. Those are my thoughts on the new Classic II collection here by KKW Beauty. Let me know if anything was helpful for you. I do hope it was, as far as the comparison with the other eyeshadow palettes that I have. And again, I'm very familiar with the formula, so overall I'm very pleased, and it's something that I'm going to be using already with my existing palettes and in my existing makeup routine. Thank you everyone for stopping by and watching. I do appreciate it, spending some time with me. Have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, and as always, stay safe out there. Look out for one another, and please come back. And I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye.